Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you are, and welcome to another Festival in a Box 3.0 tasting session. This is the Big Peat Christmas Edition 2021 session, and I am delighted to say we are joined by a very good friend, old friend of the Whiskey Lounge and myself, and that is Fred Laing himself, the legend. So I'm going to bring him in just now, so be kind. Good morning, Fred. How are you?
Morning. Nice to see you again, Eddie. Hope you're well.
Yes, I'm very well, thank you, and all the better for seeing you. And I'm trying to think the last time we actually saw each other in person, but it must be some years back.
It was, I think it was one of the tastings I did in York, which was one of the few outings I've been allowed to do in United Kingdom. It was a good few years back. It was one of your early lounges,
Hmm.
and I remember it just being such a wonderfully fun session. Uh,
Yes.
the guys who were in the class were wonderfully receptive, and it was a great afternoon. Uh, so you give me fond memories, Eddie.
Well, I might have to quote you on that, Fred, because I don't know how many people would say that. But I certainly would underline that there are still people here in York who were at that session, and I remember the one you mean, who still talk to this day about the session, about how brilliant it was, and possibly about an Elvis Presley, or no, sorry, a Mick Jagger impression, I think it was.
I'm afraid he does occasionally sneak up behind me, and there's a little angel one side saying, "No, don't do it." Uh, and Charlie Watts or Bill Wyman is on my other shoulder saying, "Yeah, go ahead." And that was one of the times that Mick Jagger took over my other persona, I'm afraid.
Oh,
Embarrassing.
well, I think I don't know about embarrassing, but people still remember it fondly, so it must have had some merit. Anyway, listen, Fred. Clearly, we know each other, and but there will be people at home watching this, thinking, who are these guys here? Um, I should say I'm the founder of the Whiskey Lounge, Eddie Ludlow, and Fred, if you could just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself, and somehow in a nutshell encapsulate how you got to being doing what you're doing.
Okay, well, I am not the founder of Douglas Laing and Company. That was my father, Fred Douglas Laing, who established the company in 1948. Uh, I've been in the whiskey business probably unofficially for about 60 years because my father used to entertain a lot of our clients and have them stay at home through the late 1950s and 60s. Through actually the late 1960s, my father took me out of school a couple of times to travel around South America with him when he was actually selling our King of Scots blended Scotch whiskey down there. Um, so I've been in the whiskey business a long time. The first time I was paid, however, to be in the whiskey business was 1968 or 69. I joined White Mackay in the days where Major Hartley White of said company was managing director. I, I was essentially carrying out an old fashioned, almost Victorian apprenticeship. And I did that for a couple of years in a number of different departments within White Mackay. Notably for me, working in the blending room, I loved working in the blending room occasionally with Major Hartley White himself. I then moved on to do a further apprenticeship at White Horse Distillers. They owned Lagavulin and Craigellachie distilleries back then, and working through fewer departments, I particularly enjoyed working in the blending department with a real gentleman who was the company blender. Gardner Ferrier was his name. A couple of years later, I joined my father at Douglas Laing and Company. He had his style of blending, which was very much heartfelt. Uh, I had learned a little bit, but learnt a lot more at the feet of my father, who had honed his blending skills over the previous 20 years. So through the course of the 70s, our King of Scots brand developed rather nicely into sales around the Pacific and into duty free. We developed a single cask range in 1999, and essentially since year 2000 we've been focused on releasing a lot of our single casks. Old Particular is our current single cask release of old malts and grain Scotch whiskies. But in 2009, by dint of the fact that we had a superabundance of some Islay malt whiskies, I developed in 2009 the packaging, which was a lot of fun, and the actual malt blend, the blended malt within the bottle, which is a very serious blended malt from only Islay distilleries. So I'm steeped in the Scotch whisky business. I think I've been officially in it now for what must be the best part of 52 or 53 years. Still think there's a wee bit of mileage under the belt, but everything's slowing up a little bit. But it's keeping me very busy and mentally active, Eddie.
Well, I have to say, Fred, that you don't look that different from the day I met you. I mean, and certainly the crack is still there.
Well, back then I had a hairline and a waistline, and each have disappeared south to a greater degree. But
Well,
I'm hanging in there.
well, I couldn't possibly comment, Fred, seeing as that I'm sure I don't look the same as when we first met. Obviously, I now have a beard to cover my multitude of chins and everything else. But hey, you know, that's what good times and whiskey does to one.
Yes, indeed, for sure.
Anyway, Fred, let's talk about the whiskey itself, shall we? Which you've kindly provided the Big Peat 2021 Christmas edition, which is, I believe, natural cask strength, whereas the normal Big Peat is a slightly less strong, rampant expression, shall we say? So I'm going to pour myself a bit of the good stuff.
Yes, I've poured one earlier. I think this one is coming in at a natural cask strength of 52.8% alcohol. We normally bottle it at 46% unchill filtered. This is probably our 11th Christmas bottling, and when we first arranged it and put it into the marketplace, we left it at natural cask strength. Most years it declines half a point or so, just as the stocks get a little bit older. We leave it at cask strength at Christmas time, essentially to differentiate it from the regular bottling. However, beyond that, at Christmas time, we like to vary the percentages of the distilleries that we bring into the equation. I think we were one of the first packs to show, particularly in the front label, that Big Peat carries Ardbeg, Bowmore, Keilila, and even some Port Ellen, amongst other distilleries. The other distilleries prefer us not to actually make mention of the distilleries used, and that's absolutely their prerogative. I thought it was quite a nice idea to show some of the whiskies that we do, however, use within the blend, something that we followed on with our other regional malts like Scallywag, where we started to show the malts used within that selection. This one is just full of coal dust. If you're old enough to remember coal being delivered, Eddie, there was often a pall of light coal particles that hung in the air when the coal was delivered.
Yes.
And so there is a dry, coal dusty side to the nose initially. Obviously, we've got the peat in there, such is the name. It's got to have peat in there. We did decide when we were putting the blend together to take a slightly sweeter stance with the malts used. So we could have taken Big Peat into quite a dry region. We decided to use a higher percentage of Kalila, which has brought, for me at least, a rather nice, sweet, damp earth, mushroomy side to the palate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still enjoying the nose. I've had this glass open for 10 or 15 minutes before we opened up.
Yeah, yes.
And certainly at home. Sorry, Eddie.
No, it's quite all right. I was just going to agree with you in terms of the sort of sweet, fruity nature of it. I get kind of poached pears, but almost like a salty butterscotch over the top of it.
Yeah. And at home, I would certainly be suggesting that you let this one warm and chambray before you even start drinking it.
Well, there's definitely a benefit to letting whiskey breathe in the glass a little while before you start nosing and tasting.
And
If
then
you
once
can
you've
wait that long.
and tomorrow morning, when the glass is empty and unwashed, go back to it and enjoy the nose once again, because it will be a different set of aromatics coming through at that stage.
And what's your feeling on the adding water to the whiskey?
I'm enjoying that too much to speak to you through a mouthful. Sometimes when I have a mouthful of the malt I'm tasting, and somebody asks a question, then I think I go into the Sean Connery mode and speaking with a mouthful of scotch. But in terms of adding water, I've been in the business a long time, and one of our French agents told me probably early last year, Fred, you have the palate of a peasant, which is not a very nice thing for me to own up on. But at that stage, we were talking about a French white wine that he had ordered. And it was so insipid was the word I used, subtle was the word he used, that I did acknowledge that I probably got a bit of a rhino hide palate in there after all these years. And I do prefer to initially take the scotch, the malt, or the old grain at the natural cask strength or at the strength it's been reduced to, as long as it's not down at 40 and 43%. For me at that time, too much of the heart and soul and the guts and the love have been taken out of it through the chill filtration. So anything that is unchill filtered is wonderful for me. It gives a real chewability. At this strength, I could still enjoy this very easily. And I did not even put aside a small jug to drop some water into this. But I fully acknowledge that not everybody has rhino hide on their palate, and that well, at 52%, probably there is an argument for many people dropping water in it to their preferred strength. It does, I know it does open up not just different aromatics and characteristics on the nose, but it does change the flavour profile as well. It's a personal preference that I take it straight up and continue to drink it straight up.
But it's an interesting point because, I mean, I will add water to whiskey at home when I feel it necessary. But I think, as you say, even if it's mid 50s, late 50s, even early 60s, you should try it at full strength, because there are some whiskies, and actually I think this is one of them, where you taste it at full strength, yet it doesn't necessarily come across as being very volatile or overpowering.
I think there are blended scotches out there that may burn your palate a little bit more at 40 or 43 than some of these unchilled filtered whiskies at a higher strength. I find that quite bizarre, but I think that is actually the case. And that's not to denigrate the blends that are reduced to 40 and 43. It's more to highlight the fact that you should not really be afraid of the higher strength malts or grains that you're consuming.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's interesting the non-chill filtering argument as well. I think for me personally, and for those of you at home who aren't aware of chill filtering, it's essentially a process whereby the fatty acids are removed from the whiskey post maturation and scooped out, basically, to enable the whiskey to be clear, to not go cloudy in the bottle at various temperatures. And really it was guys like yourselves and one or two of the standalone distilleries who decided to make a stand, I think kind of in the 90s really, and say, right, well, this is the way we want to bottle whiskey because this is the way we feel it should represent itself. And my feeling is that it adds a texture to the experience which otherwise is not necessarily there. But it surprises me to this day. I was doing a tasting some months ago, and there was a chap as a guest at the tasting who's very, very well known in the industry, a well-known blender. I won't divulge his name because that wouldn't be fair. But I could see when I started talking about non-chill filtering, I could see him shaking his head as if to say, no, you're wrong. Because there are still people in the industry who feel that either non-chill filtration or the process of not chill filtering has no effect whatsoever, or I don't know, but for me it's a fairly clear-cut case, and I think for you as well, I would think.
Yeah, very much so. And I remember fondly going into the different bottling halls in Glasgow through the late 60s, and whether it was with White Mackay or whether it was with my father sending blended Scotch at 40 degrees out to Canada or Japan, and the vessel carrying them, or the warehouse where the whiskey had been stored, had got so cold that these volatile impurities, the natural fats and oils that are in the Scotch, had solidified and actually turned into what essentially became a little Christmas snow dome, whereby the particulate hung in suspension for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, and then slowly settled down to a point where there was a layer of white, essentially powder, on the bottom of the bottle. A good shake, and the particulates would reappear. If you put the bottle on top of a radiator, these particulates would often disappear. It's an issue that happens with Scotch, and I think also with tequila. It doesn't happen with every spirit, whereby with temperature changes, these particulates are able to form, and obviously by chill filtering the whiskies, which is something that came later in the late 60s and early 70s, we removed that chilling nature that took place in the vessel or in the warehouse by naturally chilling the whiskey on the day of bottling. So that worked pretty well. But the filter pads that removed these particulates became really pretty solid. And that's what I feel is the heart, soul, and guts that is being removed with that chill filtration. And we do it with our own blends. It is an accepted norm. And I actually think the indication of no chill filtration almost sounds negative. But for me, personally, it's a massive positive. I love the extra mouthfeel, the extra aromatics and characteristics that are left in the bottle when it is not chill filtered.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you heard it from the horse's mouth right there. I mean,
Sorry for the ramble.
no, it's brilliant because I mean, Fred, you have real world experience and lots of it in terms of blending and bottling and so on. So it's good to hear my personal view underlined by actual real life experience.
I'm going to underline something of yours just now, Eddie, because I was not picking up pear on the nose, but second or third sip on the palate, I've actually picked up your pear, your fresh pear on the palate, in amongst the certain sweetness and the smoke and the phenolic and the beachy qualities.
Yeah, no, I have added just a little bit of water just to see what the reaction would be from the whiskey, and it's, as always, it's kind of served to underline the smokier characteristics, which I always find when you add water to a smoky whiskey. If you like smoke, it's a good way to go because it really does underline that. But I definitely, yeah, there's definitely some poached peaches or something. Sorry, pears.
And the finish for me just runs and runs. I would always be using this as the last whiskey to taste on an evening when we're tasting, and to tasting nights that I hope to get back to again going
Yes.
into 2022.
Yes.
There's a nice long driven quality of harbour walls and creosoted beach huts in there. I am, of course, totally biased towards it, so you have to make your own opinion on it.
Yes. No, well, I love it. I think it's a really cracking dram, and I look forward to enjoying more later, maybe. um, Now, just looking ahead at what you guys are up to in 2022, are you able to give us any heads up on any exciting developments, bottling wise or blending wise?
Cara, my daughter, who has largely taken over uh, one of what would have been my developmental roles, um, keeps her cards close to her chest. The the focus for me and for the company just now is probably more hardware focused. We've been extending the bottling, no, the distilling facility up at our Strathern distillery. That's become really quite a focus for us. And over these last 4 months, we've been developing what we call the Douglas Laing campus down in Glasgow, which will carry our probably 2 new aircraft hangar warehouses, another hangar which will carry our dry goods stock and carry out our bottlings. And we've also bought new offices because the number of staff we've had are too many to carry in our old Victorian 3-story office building in Glasgow. So bottling wise, things become very important to me in the single cask range as to what malts and what grains we release. The grains are an underrated quality. If you of all people know, Eddie, just how good an old grain whiskey can be. Not exactly the ideal promotion when I'm talking about Big Peat, but we've got some wonderful old grains coming of age at 49 and 50 years of age, and they're wonderful to release. The older they are, the more vanillid they become.
Yes.
We have this facility within something like Big Peat to personalize them. So if an importer can carry 600 to 720 bottles of a personalized label, whether it be for Edinburgh or Tokyo or special games that are taking place, we have that facility. We're still very commercial in our approach, but particularly for something like Big Peat, who is himself very important for us. The whole remarkable regional malt range has been developed for duty-free into litre bottles now. So we hope that with the advent of hopefully a softening of the Omicron variation, that foreign travel becomes more easily facilitated, that we'll see some extra duty-free sales taken there in the litre bottles. Unfortunately, I've not been privy to as much of the news, what will follow, because as you know, there's a real sensitivity about when and where and how a new product range or a new product within a range has got to be released. And it's all tied up with social media, and they keep the old git well away from social media, I've got to say.
Well, I've been called many things, Fred, but old Git's going a bit far.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm definitely talking about myself.
No, I'm talking about me. Don't worry. People feel the same way about me. Keep them away from the social media, for goodness sake.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're doing all right, the pair of us just now, without upsetting anybody.
Well, let's see. No, I think we're doing fine, and they're tasting lovely whiskey, so that should help smooth the sailing.
Well, I hope your viewers and your listeners and your imbibers are able to enjoy it with us, Eddie, at this time.
Yes, well, hopefully they've been patient and kept the bottle, for this video, so that they can enjoy both together. Now, just if I know this is difficult, but if you could tear off your Douglas Laing cap for one moment, and I'd be really interested to hear your opinion on the current state of the world of whiskey, not just Scotch whiskey, and if there's anything or any distillery or whatever that has caught your eye or taste buds, or if there's anything that really bothers you about the current state of the industry. I'd just be interested to get your take.
Nothing controversial, I have to say, Eddie. I think the Scotch whisky industry is in rude good health. We've had to recalibrate somewhat how we take our bottled stock to the market, and we certainly have become more adept at selling directly restricted stocks on our website. The last thing we want to do is to upset our retailers and our importers, but there are ways and there are efficiencies that we can bring, allowing people around the world still to gain access to our Scotch whiskies, even in the absence of retail shops, because so many of them closed through the second half of 2020 and into the early part of 2021. I think, as I say, the Scotch industry is strong and solid just now. I talked to a number of friends and they feel similarly so. If they feel like that currently, then there is a super optimism, and it's tangible, and everybody within the trade, the Scotch trade, is talking about it, that we feel very bullish going forward. That may similarly be the same with whiskies around the world, whether they be American, Japanese, Swedish, Swiss, Belgian. So there's a real optimism, certainly. In terms of drinking other people's whiskies, I tend not to, because I don't like to have to buy a bottle, but I have. Yes. Cheap Scotsman, I'm afraid. But I have had occasion to consume the Cutty Sark Prohibition, which I think is a really good dram. I think you're a keeper of the Quake, and I tasted it first up there. Very impressed by it. Similarly, the new Black Bottle, I've been very impressed with it. on the odd occasion I've had a chance to consume it. Consume it. Um, Beyond that, I'm not thinking of it that there's anything too controversial that I can bring to the equation, and that's not because I'm part of the establishment. In fact, if your camera can see the book on which my Big Peat is sitting, it's one of the Rolling Stones books. I'm still a bit of a rebel within that Mick Jagger persona. So I tend not to see myself as part of the establishment, and see ourselves as a little bit disruptive and rebellious. But I think, generally speaking, the trade is good. The trade feels good. We certainly feel confident for the future, without feeling over cocky, because we know we've got to get our next release correct in terms of a family-owned business such as we are, in order for the consumer to be satisfied with that when he might drink it 3 months, 6 months down the road. Our next meal depends on quality being delivered today. So we're still very much focused and driven on that quality, but I think probably everybody else is within their own equation. So beyond the distillery project, in terms of how we're expanding Strathern Distillery in Perthshire, and how we are developing things down in the Glasgow operation, nothing too big to report, certainly on the bottled front just now, with apologies, Eddie.
That's quite all right. I totally understand, but you obviously understand I have to ask.
Yes, for sure.
Now, just lastly, and maybe a little bit of fun, what outside of whiskey do you enjoy drink-wise?
Drink-wise, because there's a lot of things outside whiskey I enjoy, but because I still enjoy my sport. I took up skiing when I was 50, and I'm just so disappointed not to have been away before Christmas. I'm still hoping that I can follow through a ski holiday in February. I play competitive squash. I still play team squash, and I play tennis. In terms of drink, however, I'm quite low key. I don't ease too far away from a big chunky Ribera del Duero red. I like my Rojas. I like my Australian red wines. White wines, I do feel, as I indicated earlier, are a little bit too subtle and insipid for me. So if I can find a big Australian Chardonnay that actually has some butter, oak, and beef to it, it's the closest I get to a white wine that I like. I love slaking my thirst with something cold. And so whilst midweek, that might be a Diet Coke, at the weekend it will certainly be a couple of lagers. Currently, I think I'm a bit of a Peroni fan. Beyond that, I've known people who like their bitters, and I'm not a bitter sort of guy. So anything like Aperol is lost on me, as is champagne. But chacun son goût, as they say, Eddie. As for me, a lager and one of my malts is a great way to watch a movie on a Saturday night, as we are out less and less just now because of the dreaded COVID.
Yes, indeed. Oh, just out of interest, what kind of films do you like?
Films. Well, obviously, I'm a Bond fan, but obviously, yes. And I have quite enjoyed Daniel Moore's impact on the Bond movies. until this last one, I've really not been a fan of. It's the first time since 1962 or 63 when I saw Dr. No that I had not enjoyed a Bond movie.
Oh, really?
Just a bit too. No, I was going to say something which would be totally unwoke. I just held back. I just held back from
Well
saying
done.
it.
Well
So
done.
my daughter will be very, very pleased with me. But I did feel it was getting a bit soft and soppy around the edges. I really rather like the Scandinavian film noir that I pick up, even with subtitles. So I really like that. And Netflix has been a boon for me. So I still like a bit of adventure, and I think I still like to see foreign movies, largely because they're set abroad, and I have really missed foreign travel. I had planned to do a lot more foreign travel as I eased out of the company stage by stage, and of course that just was not possible through last year.
Yeah.
So I anything that gives me a taste of being abroad, I still rather like just now.
Yes. Well, let's hope, fingers crossed, that this year, as in 2022, will be better for everybody, and we can all perhaps enjoy some kind of foreign stay or something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, anyway, listen, Fred, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for agreeing to appear and giving us all your wonderful stories, and well, not all of them obviously, but a few of them, and sharing with us your views and what it is you've done through such a rich and historic life already. So, Fred,
it's not the way I see it, Eddie, but you're very kind that way. You probably say that to all the girls that you're interviewing. But I've enjoyed talking to you again. I hope those who have opened up with us have enjoyed it and have enjoyed the dram. Certainly nice talking to you again. Wish you all the best for a very healthy, happy and prosperous 2022. And to everybody who's got a Big Peat in front of them, all best wishes.
Yes, indeed. All the best to you at home. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the series of tastings. Fred, I genuinely hope we can meet up at some point this year. That would be one of my New Year wishes. But for the time being, I will say Slanjavar, and your good health, and all the best to everyone at Douglas Laing as well.
That's very kind. Good. If they let me out on my own, I'll be there ready.
Cheers. Thank you.
All best wishes. Nice talking to you.
You too.
Cheers.